Welcome back to another Decktech. And today, I'm not with Samuel. I have a very special guest, the winner of the Championnat des Français, Takuya, or as some of you might know him as Matt. Welcome.
Hi.
So, both you and me, we know each other for quite some time, and I know that you are a very big Rakdos passionate.
Indeed.
So I'm not super surprised that you took a Rakdos deck to this field. However, I think quite a few people were surprised about the fact that it's Ellie and Ellie. Very interesting pile. We've seen this partner combination a couple of times on YouTube from smaller events. Samuel and me also casted those two at the LTC, if I remember correctly. And this back then was a deck that was leaning more into the CMC2 Ellie. And our conclusion was like, yeah, that looks cool, brings back classic Rakdos aggro, right? But the CMC3 version is much more powerful. And then we had like a second video, and this version was leaning more into the CMC3 Ellie, and I thought like, I don't know, the list looks okay, but not that good. I know someone who might have like a really good Ellie list. This was all
Real.
before the CDF. All of a sudden, you had like a very successful day one, and I thought, well, maybe we should talk about this list because it's super interesting and you're doing good with it, and it's just great to have like some more or less classic aggro back in the format. And here we go. You took the trophy. Congrats for this again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very, very amazing run. And yeah, today we will have a look at the list. I have some questions prepared for you. We will talk about when to cast either of those guys. We will look at a few individual includes. We can also have a look at your considering or your maybe board, because there are quite a few cards in there that most players building the deck from scratch would probably include them in the 99. You decided not to do so. I'm curious why that is. So let's give it a go. What was like your initial motivation to play the deck? When did you came in contact with this partner combination?
So I saw the spoilers pretty early on, since these are from a secret lair. So the 3-mana one, I was like, maybe this is a Yuri card, but the deck wasn't really good at the moment, so I hadn't had the time to try it yet. Then I saw a game on YouTube with the Ellie 2 and the other Duel Commander.
Oh yeah, Joe.
Yeah, so pretty standard aggro stuff, splashing green. And my Rakdos heart told me, yeah, you can't play green. So I tried my best to do a 2-mana Ellie deck. It looked like Judas, just curving out. I went to my local Championnat regional, big regional, and I went 0-4.
Okay. That was the very first run you took. 04 is a result with which you would probably say, yeah, okay, we can try another time, but maybe we can focus on something else. From the past, I know that you are very much, or you were very much invested into Yuri and things like this, right? So Yuri might be a deck that is not up to today's power level anymore. Maybe it is. I'm not very much looking into the deck. But what made you say that you want to give Ellie and Ellie another try?
So I think, like everyone, I tried most of the meta decks and nothing really stuck to me. So I went back to the board, and my friend told me, just play Rakdos for the French Cup. Like, that's what you know. That's what you know. You play it well. We'll have time to tune the deck. It has to be good. And here we are.
That's a cool story. Yeah. What about Asmo? Have you tried Asmo for a bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I tried Asmo 3D Unban. It was pretty sweet, but it's not a real. It's a fake aggro deck. This your commander doesn't. It says it costs 1, but it costs also 1 to cycle, and
Yeah,
you
that's right.
never most of the time you don't have the free cycler in your hand. So basically it's a 3/3 for 2, which is not that aggressive.
Yeah, that's very true.
And
Um,
then there was felt a bit more mid-rangey and that slower than what I liked.
and it's not aristocrats, right? I mean, you're sacrificing
Also,
artifacts. That's
yeah,
okay.
I was eating the foods.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, back to this list. I think the most questions we received, and I saw during the stream and in chats and whatsoever, is you built this deck leaning into CMC3 Ellie much more because this one is the powerful one amongst those two. Not saying that Ellie 2 isn't powerful, but she's yeah much worse, I would say, right?
A
It
bit weak.
yeah a bit weaker is okay. Um, when are the times in which you decide to cast either of them? It might be also like matchup dependent, but I would personally assume it comes down to your mulligans. What do you think?
So there's a few cards that stick to mind if you want to cast the 2-cost one. Since she produces tokens that are also 1/1s, that's important. So if you have Skull Clamp and your hand is like you're already down to 6 cards, 5, 6 cards,
Hmm.
just make a bunch of tokens, draw some cards. Bombardments, complete bombardments is a
Hmm.
pretty good one because the two commanders are doing two different things. One needs fodder and the other one creates fodder. So you might have a hand with like 2 removal spells, a few lands, and just one guy. And then you need the 2-cost one to make a whole board. And maybe you have a hand with a bunch of guys that makes tokens. And then you can combo kill your opponent out of nowhere. I mean, out of nowhere, not exactly, because they can do the math too, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
still pretty
definitely.
impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there was this one match where I think you did like 12 or 14 damage in one turn just by
Yeah,
casting CMC3 Ellie and recycling all the tokens that you do. That was crazy. You just had to make sure you have a life point advantage, and that's it, right? Mm,
yes.
is there a matchup in which you say you can never go for either of them, or is it always, as you explained, like more like mulligan dependent? There might be decks in which you say, well, there's not enough time to cast the CMC3 Ellie, so I rather have to go for the CMC2, and then I'm also searching for hands that would further support this.
Mhm. So against combo decks, some combo decks are very all in, maybe like the FANTASTICAR or Storm, and they play very few removal spells. And if you have a Spirit Guide in your hand, Ellie is usually a good turn one.
Hmm.
She can snowball the game out of control.
Hmm.
And when you have multiple turn 3 replays in your hand, maybe it's not good to play 3 mana Ellie. At the same time, she can be a great 4-drop with another 1-drop. So it's hard to evaluate. Myself, I often do the mistake of playing one of them too early in the game and locking myself out of the other one.
Hmm.
And there's a special card for this deck in the lands.
Let me check.
Uh, we have the command beacon.
Yeah,
That's pretty
right.
sweet. So you can sack the beacon to get only one of your two commanders, not both. These are partner, but you can cast the other one from your hand. So you can
That's
cast both in the same game,
yeah, yeah.
and it
That's
turns your make a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, turn 4, play command beacon, crack it, play Ellie for 3 mana, win the game. That's it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you can bring both of those down and she sticks and you make a bunch of tokens, right? Then this one is more or less an auto win, I would say. That's definitely very, very sweet. Looking at the 99 here, before we talk about a couple of matchups, I already teased it a little bit when you have a look at the maybe board. Maybe we will just start with that. People will directly ask the question, why would you not play Barrowgolf, Deadpool, Screaming Nemesis, Paragolf? blah blah blah. All this good stuff that you see in various decks, which is kind of hard to justify not to play these days, especially maybe the CMC3 Goiv. I mean, there's always this argument, yeah, when you want to have like a very fast deck, this guy would obviously compete with the CMC3 slot of your commander, and in some cases you would rather try to resolve your commander because it might win you the game, as you did with these 14 damage in one turn.
Yes.
But what are the other reasons? You've cut so many cards that I would say, I mean, if I look at the Super Shredder, I would say this is a very good card for what you're trying to do in this deck, right?
Yeah, Shredder seems like a really easy include, and then you try it, and it's either win more,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like the biggest thing you could ever do. Yes, it will win you the game, or you're behind, and it's there, it's 1/1, and you pay 2 mana for 1/1, and it's the worst thing you can do in your deck.
Mm. And yeah, I mean, there might be like a couple of inclusions or exclusions in this case. Gut is leaning very much into playing the CMC2 Ellie, right? Mm.
Yes.
And things like Screaming Nemesis would
I
probably
I
be.
I had this in my deck pretty late, and one of my friends told me, "Well, can you proc it? Can you deal damage like reliably against LUMRA, for example?
Mhm.
Because you really don't want to see the run orb on the field."
Yeah.
And the answer was probably not, so I had to cut it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I can totally get behind why you're cutting like the higher curve, the 4 drops and stuff. Your mana curve overall is very, very low. Mm, talking about some of the cards that you decided to include instead is all the small creatures that you
All the
would,
chaff.
yeah, all the chaff that you would usually see at an FNM, right? Back then when people played War of the Sparks, FNM, or pre-release and stuff like this. It's obvious that it supports the CMC3 Ellie, but how does your game plan looks like? Again, depends on the matchup for sure. If let's say you face a matchup in which it's very unlikely to resolve either of those cards, given that the quality of those 1 drops is,
Abysmal, yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
They're really weak card individually, yeah. But that's why we have a few, not too much, but a few cards that are way better on their own. Like, I mean, Fear Missing Out is pretty fine. Emperor Bones, Go, also pretty sweet for the recursive synergy.
Mhm.
You can just bolt them at the each end step by bringing back a guy, and then you just try to flood the board and eke out value from bringing back your guys. You have surveils, a bit of graveyard synergy. Uh, Phoenix and Scrap Heaps round job, pretty amazing for different reasons, but they can just keep your board alive
Yeah, this one
and
is
running.
really cool. It's quite old school, I would say, but
Yeah, uh, it's one of my favorite ones.
and also Claim and Fame is also very old school, but in a deck like yours with that curve, it's a really, really good reanimation.
Yeah,
Like it's
there's also a really sweet play with Claim Fame, where if you have Go on board and you gamble
Mhm.
with an empty hand, so gamble becomes Entomb, and you
Mhm.
go Fame onto Go, becomes a 4/2, attacks,
Ooh.
becomes a 5/3, maybe it's not blocked, deal 5, and step deal
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, that's really good. That's true. I'm also a big fan of Gamble, rather from playing Quintorius, but still,
Yeah,
this deck this card is a great card.
yeah, gamble is a bit underplayed, I think, in the format, and since MH3 and we had Detective Phoenix, it's just a crazy card.
Mm.
It became like bad demonic tutor to Entomb. And yeah, sometimes we'll cast bad demonic tutor for maybe even for your land because you really need it, and that's fine. And when you're casting for the Entomb mod, or when you have like 2 or 3 cards in your hand, you need Phoenix, maybe a recursive guy, There's also a Forsaken Miner. That's a combo piece. Maybe everyone doesn't know how it combos.
Where is it? Here
So
we
if
go. Yep.
yeah, so if you have either 3-mana Ellie or bombardments in play, you
Hmm.
can sack anything if you have the miner in the grave, or if it's in play, you can sack it. Is a crime trigger, you pay it, bring it back, and you can sack it again, and you just pay as much black mana as you can to dome them.
Yeah. So this is instead of having a body that would recreate another body, this one is basically coming back all over again. Would probably go in a similar direction as, or is pretty much the same as Gravecrawler with a second zombie on field, right?
Yes, and
Yeah,
the 2-mana commander provides you with zombies, so sometimes you
right.
can just have that zombie sitting there on the field.
Oh, okay. Even fungus zombies. Yeah, right. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
it's there's a lot of text on both cards. It's mostly commander coded,
Yeah,
but it works fine in 1v1.
yeah, that's cool. Mm, this when I saw this card, I thought you would, and since you also play Gravecrawler, I thought you would lean into the combo with the CMC3 Warren Soul
Yeah,
Trader, I think
Warren
it's
Soul
called,
Trader.
right? Yeah. You
Uh,
probably did not decide to do that because from my experience, 3-card combos are a bit too cute in this format.
um, yeah, in Yuri, it's pretty great combo, but the 3-mana card is just great in Yuri. Here,
Mm.
it's really whatever. You you only want to sack your guys for life if it's to your commander.
Hmm.
Uh, Otherwise, it's a too low impact card for 3-mana. You
Hmm.
need to have like really strong 3-mana cards.
Yeah, I
There's
can totally see that.
Yeah, here we have if we count like Phoenix, you don't play it much often for 3, neither Bogart Troller. So you have mostly Broadside Bombardier. It's Yeah, everyone knows this one.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Sephiroth too, and Aristocrats is
Yeah, as we
really good
said
too.
earlier, right? You have in total. I mean, I can sort by mana cost real quick, but you have in total
Yeah,
only.
I
Oh yeah,
I
okay,
downsized a few of the costs.
yeah,
So
but that makes sense. I mean, if you want to cast
yeah,
Ellie 3 the majority of times, then you want to have like you don't want to have any drops that would compete with her, and those are really really good cards that both fit the synergy perfectly. So you
yeah.
cannot really
And
um
Sephiroth is also one of the few cards in the deck that can either draw cards
yeah,
and
right.
gain life, and the that few life points that you can gain are pretty good, since if you have life points than your opponent, you can combo kill him outright because you
Mm.
will die first from the 3-mana Ellie.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's also why we have the Scorpion in the 1 cost.
The
And the serrated
Scorpion.
Scorpion, yeah.
Ah, here we go. Ah, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's like another 1/1 that makes a 1/1
Yeah,
only with Ellie, but it costs 0 life to deal 4 damage,
yeah, right. Yeah,
and it
that's
can
pretty
be
cool.
pretty clutch.
Mm, one question that I have is you entered theoretically you entered and no also practically we saw the metagame breakdown. I think it was 20% Spider-Man, right? Around 400
Yes.
players and about 20% Spider-Man, which is quite a lot. And you just said that usually the control decks play more counter spells than interaction, which means things like Hexing Squelcher should be really, really good.
Yeah.
What
At
was,
worst, they
yeah?
can they have to bounce it before they can counter the spell. They take 2, you replay it, and at best they just can't deal with it.
Hmm. Have you considered playing the Spider-Man 2? I mean, it can be countered by itself, but
Uh,
it adds like a similar effect to the board just in order
yeah.
to protect your stuff from being countered, you know?
So I dismissed it pretty quickly because it has 2 effects. your spells, you think your creature spells can be countered, and it's great against Glacial Chasm, Maze of Ith, and sometimes white protection spells.
Mhm.
But LUMRA matchup, you can beat Chasm without the Spider Punk. And the fact that Punk can be countered is really rough against blue decks. And the
Mhm.
body is just whatever. So
Yeah.
I decided to just play the Squelcher.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Because
I can see that. The Squasher is definitely the better creature, right?
you don't
Also
want to
because
draw
of
too
the
many of them against non-blue decks.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a feeling for how many, or you could tell us how many blue decks you actually faced during
Uh,
those 15 rounds in total? No, 16, right? Yeah.
I think
With
the
the
more I played, I think on day one I faced mostly white decks and a few blue decks at the end of the day. And on day two I faced only blue decks, except for Terra. I mean, it's not a blue deck per se that have many counter magic,
Mhm.
apart from maybe Misstep.
Before we talk about some of those matchups, I just want to have a quick look at the land base. I think we talked about Command Beacon earlier. Really cool
Yes.
inclusion. We have the countryside. We see that very often today in various decks. Was there ever a situation where you made a token? Probably not.
In the CDF, I did not, but in
Okay,
testing, it happened. It happened a few times where I made a token. It was mostly like 2 more damage for the 3 cost Ellie.
that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, like 7 mana is a lot, and you have to get
Yeah,
there.
but sometimes you get into a really grindy game
Yeah,
against
exactly.
control, and you can look at the number of lands. I usually run more lands than most aggro players
Hmm.
because
That's
we
true.
have like 40 with the two double face cards. We have a Springleaf Drum for Urza Saga so that your land doesn't fade. And we have the Spirit Guide also
Yeah,
for
yeah,
explosive cards. And sometimes you just pay the one with the ape.
yeah, yeah. That's right. Apart from that, the I think what is one of the I don't want to say most impactful inclusion, but a very good inclusion because people very much underestimated is Mount Doom. It's here for quite some time, but I've already seen plenty of games rather with Yuri and sometimes Asmo than Ellie and Ellie, in which opponent is on 1 HP, and then you have this situation, for example, as you explained earlier, you gamble for it,
Yeah,
and you win the gamble, and you play the land, and especially against control, they can't do anything outside of playing a Tailzone and stuff like this. So this is a really cool inclusion, in my opinion. Lazotep Query should also be a very good fit for your strategy, not only because of the sacrifice, but also because you can relatively cheaply get back stuff.
yeah,
Mm,
uh, you can get best stuff against counterspell, except for Tales and Stifle. And there's a few funny synergy with Lazotep. So it brings back the token as a zombie. So if you have Gravecrawler,
yeah.
+1. And as a 4/4, so if you have Go, it's straight up a 4/4. If you have Yuri to bring back, it's now a 4/4, which is
All right.
pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And there's also a funny one drop, the Nested Shambler, which
Yeah.
makes as many squirrels when it dies to its power. And making 4 guys for 4 mana is just win the game.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I mean, this is also a zombie, by the way. The Gravecrawler is having a great time in your deck.
Yeah,
I see that.
sneaky zombies. We have Karen Feeder.
Stitcher also.
Yeah,
The bitter,
Stitcher
the
is
rotten.
rotten.
Yeah.
Double zombies.
This one did a mercenary, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So you have a couple of them. Yeah. That's really cool. Um, Last thing I have to mention, I think this is the first deck I see that seriously makes good use of the Spymaster's Vault.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I do play it in Yuri also.
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I think Prosh lists also play this.
I
okay.
think I've seen this, yeah, playing it in Rush.
Yeah. But apart from that, I think this list is really much the first one that does it really, really good. Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
usually you have this on the field and the opponent goes for a wipe. You get maybe one or two guys back, and then you activate it, and your 1/1 becomes a like 3/3 for 4. And
Yeah.
on the crackback, you're just already attacking them for bench.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's talk about some of the matchups. You said already that LUMRA is not that much of a problematic matchup, which means or you can go
I mean,
around Glacial
Glacial
Chasm.
Chasm is not
Yeah.
really problematic. The rest is.
Okay. Okay. Is it a deck that is on average faster than yours?
Um, on, I mean, I haven't done the math of the like how fast they can go, but they can go. They can kill you way faster than you can. Like there's a few crazy draws where you can kill on turn 3 with Ellie, but
Mhm.
mostly you kill on turn 4. Turn 4 is your good turn, whereas Lumra they can get like 6 mana on turn 2 maybe, and you just lost on the spot.
But it's
Uh,
definitely a matchup in which you aggressively mulligan for CMC2, right? Because
yeah,
CMC3, sorry.
yeah, it's either you play 2-1 curve and you have like broadside because they have way less removal
Mhm.
than other decks, and you go for a crazy finish, or you go small drop, small guy, sack them all, kill you on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have the pesky uh, Doughty. That's
Right.
especially for LUMRA. But yeah, actually, 1 week before the CDF, I didn't have this card in my deck. I had Contamination,
Mhm.
and I felt that 3 mana was way too slow, even
Mhm.
for uh, making them play uh, only mono black, so almost no magic. But even with a few activated abilities and lands, they could get like a green mana here or there, and then go over the top.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That's right. That's usually another one of those avenues that the aristocrats decks are going
Yeah,
for, right?
because you can go on turn 2 to cost Ellie, and then on
Yep.
turn 3 Contamination, attack, make a guy, and every turn you sack the guy you just made, and they can usually they wouldn't be able to play the game, but have like Crumbling Vestige, and they can
Oh
pick it
yeah.
up.
Right.
Sometimes they can play Talongaze or Madara on your upkeep, so they phase out your commander, and
Mhm.
then you have or you can't attack and you have no fodder. It, there's so many things that can go wrong, and maybe you have the 3-drop on the draw, and on turn 3 they already have so many things in play. Maybe they have Utopia Sprawl or Enchantment.
Wild growth, you mean? Or like, yeah,
Yeah,
things like
White
this,
Cross.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that bypasses the Contamination. And yeah, Lumra is a matchup where the game shouldn't go past turn 4 or 5. Either one side will kill the other pretty fast. And
Mhm.
if it does, it's because there's a chasm blocking the game. And when it pops at their upkeep, you'll be ready to gun them down, usually.
Mhm. Maybe you have like a right time thundering eruption at that
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
Would be one of the few great tools that you can play here against that. How about the white matchups? Did you face even in practice matchup? I could imagine that like white matchups are rather difficult to tackle.
Yeah.
Talia, Cloud, stuff like this.
I think, let me get the matchups. I think on day 1 I faced mostly white-based decks.
Okay, interesting.
So first game I had Yoshi,
Hmm.
Cloud. I played against full color control without green, so
Hmm.
white removals. Quintorius uh, and Ang. So 5 out of 5, yeah, 5 white decks on
Hmm.
day 1. And yeah, that's why you have ways to sacrifice your creatures so that you can keep bringing them back and not leaving them in exile.
Yeah.
So Goblin Bombardments.
Yeah, and carrion feeder and things like this, right?
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
pretty great. And also Lazotep Quarry. It's a sneaky way to keep your guys alive
Sure.
and also to beat Baragoyf or GT or anything that needs to deal you combat damage, since you can block and before damage you just sack it and most things don't have trample.
Yeah, that's right. Always a good combat trick against those things.
But yeah, white removal is pretty tricky and sometimes it will get you. That's fine. You have
Mhm.
to go for it. And yeah, white decks. Um, so for failure, you need to have the removal. Good for us. Every removal you have in the deck, except for Fury, is instant speed because of Spider 99, so we can catch the failure.
Mhm.
Um, and against Cloud, they either you can like put it out into play and block the death trigger from Clamp, or you can kill it in response. Or maybe they go for more value line, like a longer game, and they grab immediately the pure formalware, and you can trigger for Rotten Reunion to counter the formalware, kinda.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm.
These decks are these are pretty grindy matchups. So either you have the hand like God Hand, you kill them on turn 4, or you have to really like use your resources in a way that you know the game is gonna go long.
Yeah.
So don't throw away your cards.
Yeah, that's a good advice here. I mean, I don't know. Last time I played Failure, I think I had like an easy time against red decks, but this one here is a bit different. And from an Asmo perspective, Asmo also has trouble dealing with white decks, but I can see that
Mm.
this tackles it differently. I find it interesting that you say you specifically tuned the Spider-Man matchup in a way that you only included instant speed
Yeah,
removal apart
not
from
even
Fury.
one chain lightning. I know many red players like they enjoy chain lightning, maybe in Deadpool or Aragorn, but
Mhm.
you really want every bit of piece of removal to be able to kill something at instant speed if possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way how it goes today. So how's the Spider-Man matchup actually going?
So it's a weird matchup at CDF. It felt I felt ahead, but in testing, I felt behind. I felt behind because if you don't take over the board pretty fast, they can just gun down your stuff. Because if you look at the deck, there's maybe like 2 or 3 cards that have 3 toughness, and everything else is just small dude. And small means death against 99.
Mhm.
Uh, but you have, like I said, many instant removal spell. I even added one more, I think, before. Some don't even cost mana, like Snuff Out. And yeah, every removal is one cost or 0 cost. So
Mhm.
it doesn't cost you much tempo, even if they counter it. And then when they do their combo, they boost it to a +3/+0 and they do 15. You should have at this point a blocker, and at best it's a 1/1 that makes a 1/1 when it dies, so they can really kill it to clear the way. So what I've seen in my weekend against this deck was that they just didn't have the opportunity to go for the combo kill, except when they had the Phoenix, since the deck doesn't really fly.
Mhm.
And then it's a it's a weird race because at any time, especially if you're at 15 or lower, they can kill you. But at the same time, they have to like mitigate your board, your damage, because you will take over pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Like I
mean,
won against a board, like the opponent had twice their commander on board and TNN. and I was just attacking constantly over it. They didn't care.
That's
It's a bit weird to say, but yeah, it worked.
I didn't give a fuck, mate. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it works out, but I was just about to say the more you flood the board with those pesky creatures, the harder it gets,
Yeah,
right? Because
they don't really have real wrath effects, and
exactly,
they
exactly.
have like uh, they have draw spells. They can filter their draws, but they can't like really trigger out the fury and the pyrokinesis.
Mm.
Whereas we can, if we really want to, you'll just trigger into the removal spell and check the 99 on the spot.
Yeah, interesting. Last but not least, regarding like the very meta-ish games, I would assume you have a pretty good game against Emery because I played Emery myself recently quite a bit, and I think it's a solid deck, but it has problems tackling those aggressive matchups. And this deck particularly i- is
Pretty aggressive.
flooding the boards, yeah, with all those 1/1 creatures, and you can maybe block a few of them, but you can't really deal with 4/1/1s coming down, and you can counter a few of those spells, but the longer the game goes, especially with Occult Conscript and
Mhm.
Forsaken Mine and stuff, things that come back, you play all those things that are, it's not really, it doesn't feel good to counter them, let's say it like
Yeah,
this.
it's really bad to counter them. I mean, if you have to, you will, but it it's not a good exchange.
Yeah, exactly. But what I would be curious about before we wrap it up, how's the TASIGUR matchup? Of course, you won against Askeladdin in the finals. I guess you might be slightly ahead, also because once she resolves, she has indestructible. All Kazugo effects except for Dismember, I guess, are do
Yeah,
say
Toxic
destroy, right?
Illusion Dismember.
All right, okay, yeah, those one as well.
And they can also like try to stifle the effect if you have only one guy on the board to sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And then you still have paid 2 life because it's part of the
Yeah.
activation. Mm.
So yeah, Tazigor. Actually, I think it's a better matchup than 99.
Hmm.
The 4/5 they can play early, like turn 2, turn 3, is really whatever. It's not really threatening. If they want to pay 4 mana to sink and draw a random card, that's fine. It's really bad tempo play. You can just make a bunch of guys and attack through the 4/5. Usually you lose the games where they are the one that are the beatdown and they're starting to attack you. That's when you know they're probably gonna win the game because usually you're not in a position at Azure to be the attacker in these kinds of matchup.
Hmm.
And you're also really bad at beating Jace plus Pact or just exile your whole deck.
Hmm.
You have like one real out, which is there. You can force them to sacrifice Jace,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
usually it also says Planeswalker. It's a sneaky line, but
Yeah.
usually there's Tazigor on the board, and you have a few discard spells, but it's not it's not really easy to snag the chase. But otherwise, you just grind them out. Both of their wrath cost life, but they're not really that good. But you have to be careful not to overcommit. It's a bit tricky because if you overcommit too much, you're punished. But one of the games I lost in the rounds against Askeladdin was because I didn't commit enough. So I wasted mana and I gave them a breathing room. But yeah, that's the classic aggro versus control matchups.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's
it's a bit
interesting.
favored for Itos.
Yeah. I mean, I can see why you're struggling with the Jace combo. I think most decks have a problem. Most decks that do not interact stack based with other
Mm.
spells, might have a problem against that. Mm,
But
one
at the same
more.
time, it's 5 mana, and even when they have both cards in their hand, it's 2 cards that are not interacting with the board to keep them alive.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the downside of playing the combo. One more thing. You said you face Quintorius, right? I
I
think
did.
in theory this shouldn't be a bad matchup for Quintorius because Quintorius has Exile, Quintorius has Sweepers. You don't really interact with their graveyard apart from Dowdy and maybe the Rotten Reunion. So at some point they get to cast the elephant. They make a bunch of tokens. Also, they tackle your graveyard, which goes
Yeah.
against all the blood-soaked champions and unearth strategies and whatsoever. So in theory, this might be a hard matchup. No.
It's a bit hard. So for my testing, it was fine, but my opponents were a bit iffy on their plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then I played a bit against Mathieu Tassa, one of
Mm-hmm.
the other that also won the
The
CDF a
yeah,
while
yeah,
ago with
yeah.
Signfoot. And yeah, he's still a pretty great player uh, on um, on Quintorius. And yeah, I think he beat me twice or thrice, uh, including once in the rounds on day one. And the games are not that long because, as you said, you can grind the control deck since they exile your graveyard and they exile your stuff on the board. So you don't have that graveyard element. And once they're established with the Planeswalker, they can kill you pretty fast.
Yeah,
Yeah, usually like one swing or two is enough.
exactly.
And sometimes you already played 3 mana Ellie and you're already low on life. And you kind of gambled your game that they weren't able to kill all your guys or kill you as fast as you thought they would. Uh, but yeah, it's pretty interesting matchup. You have to really apply pressure early on, and they will have the removal spells. But they can have like lands removals and the stones, like the ones that exile the grave,
Mm-hmm.
have a
Mm-hmm.
mix of a bit of everything, and maybe they will try it in the wrong way. And their deck, like you won't win the late game against them. Like turn 5, turn 6, turn 7. Each time they see more cards with their commander, you're losing. So you have to be like lightning fast. And usually you'll play 3-cost Ellie because they will game up the board with other spirits, and you won't be able to go past that. So you have to fling all your creatures at their face.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit tricky since they have that the wrath and so much removal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think yeah, it's from my mind, it's probably one of the most difficult matchups you could face with this deck, unless you're facing LUMRA, and as you said, you have to be extremely fast against LUMRA. Is there any other meta deck that I forgot about that we should maybe mention? Is there like a very fancy matchup that you remember from the 16 rounds that you would like to mention?
Well, I know there's a bit of hype around the new toy like the Fantasticar, and
Yeah.
we've seen the deck. I have literally no answer to any artifact. I can't destroy an artifact, and
Okay.
I chose on purpose. I thought to myself, this is new. There's a bunch of old weird cards people are not gonna get their hands on fast enough. At best, there's a few people playing the deck in the room, and I'll just dodge it, which I did. So it paid off. And I really didn't want to play Aberrate because it's 2 mana. It's 2 mana is really expensive for a removal spell and or Force to Despair. I really hate this card. It's never good when you want it to be. So such a clunky card. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I like your Giga Chat energy you brought to the
I know
tournament.
most of my friends played against like 1, 2, 3 of them
Yeah.
in their run, but sometimes you gotta have the right pairings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's also for your specific strategy, it's kind of hard to squeeze in like the artifact interaction, right? We saw some very creative cards, and I'm not talking about a braid. I'm rather talking about, I think the spell is called Siege Smash. That
Yeah, there's this one you had to play in the Nadu meta to kill the equipments.
either at that time exactly. You saw it now in some Spider-Man lists, for example, right? You can use the other part to boost
Yeah, to
Spider-Man and then deal more damage.
I
That's
see.
also not bad, right? And a couple of more. I think Askeladdin played another some kind of heritage reclamation. I don't know how it's called from Strixhaven. You can also exile a card from graveyard, draw a card, or like
Yeah, I
destroy
mean
an
these are
artifact.
pretty fine, but
Yeah, definitely.
uh, those are like in your control deck, you can just cycle it at the end of turn.
Exactly.
In your aggro deck, you need to keep the pressure on, and if you draw a card that does literally nothing, it can be pretty hard.
Yeah, totally.
It's like you didn't draw a card at all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'm also surprised in terms of how Fantastic Card did overall. I would have expected to see like more success from those decks. Then again, people were pretty much prepared for that and other meta decks, right? Since
Yeah.
it's that big of a competition, so it perfectly makes sense to um,
Mm.
yeah, to be prepared for that.
Yeah, maybe a few matchups that are pretty common, like Aragorn and Deadpool.
Hmm. Hmm.
You might face. Uh, so Aragorn plays a bit like 99, since you should want to remove the 4/4, but you can wait a turn. If you take a hit from Arena of Glory, hasting the king, it's fine. And usually you can just get in the grindy game, take back the monarchy, maybe sit on it, and not not every removal spell you have kills the king, but some of them does. And at worst, you can just take trades, and you should be able to grind them.
Hmm.
And their creatures are mostly bad, except for like Fleisch or a few like broken spells like Ajani, and they're pretty small, like the 2-drop, the 2/1 flyers with Flash, like Malcolm, Mastermind. These are really whatever
Yeah,
against your
yeah, yeah,
deck. I see my opponents flashing them, trying to block my 1/1 that makes a 1/1 when it dies. It's really bad.
yeah. One more thing that that came to my mind was Bridget, which might be a pretty good
Yeah, yeah, I
matchup.
know it's pretty popular in France, in southern parts of France. And it's it feels like Slime Foot, whereas they play their commander, they make 2 bodies for 3 mana. But at the same time, they're pretty reliant on their board, and like most of your tutors will go into Fury or Pyrokinesis, the one.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're pretty heavy combo deck. They can play bad mid-range game, and maybe you will die to just Gerhol big hits, and you they play like Guide Pride, and it overwhelms you. But you should be able to stop them from comboing, and then you go into a game where you just kill a few key pieces and you keep pressuring, and you should cross the finish line.
Yeah. I mean, all the creatures are rather small, and the Seed Cradle Witch combo is rather clunky. Activation costs 4. The witch
Yeah,
itself is
and
only
I
a
don't even
1/1.
think the Seed Cradle gives trample, so if they just have a infinite Brigid, you jump it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does not give trample, just untap, right? Okay, interesting. Lots of thoughts, lots of insights on your 99, on the tournament, on the matchups. Was very interesting. Um, I think we're more or less at the end. Unless you have something else to add, I would probably wrap it up. I think that was
Maybe.
a really good deep dive into your
Yes.
Ellie pile.
Yeah, there's one more thing.
Sure,
Yeah,
shoot.
I just you guys can pause the video, think for a bit. What's the best creature in the deck?
Okay.
Because there's one particular card that you want to reanimate most of the time, and it's not the
Okay.
one you think.
Okay. We will do this. I will also think about it. I will have a look. I mean, I can say something now, but then it might be spoiled. So people can decide on their own. Then you
Yeah,
can write it down in the chat, and you will have a look, and you can say yes or no. And at some point, we will tell the solution.
okay.
Great. Okay. Thanks a lot for your time, mate. Was
Thank
a
you for
was
having me.
a yeah, it was a hell of a ride. I mean, it's really cool to talk about that, especially in a meta in which aggressive decks are staying right in front of the abyss, I would say.
Yeah, in
Not
front
that
of
they're
these
dead.
spiders in the abyss.
Exactly, yeah. The spiders are spidering their webs inside, yeah. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure you inspired lots of people to try that out. You also inspired me already. I bought the cards. I will give it a go. Very much looking forward to play this pile. If you have any further questions, you can of course put them down in the comments. You can ask at our Discord. Matt is also part of our Discord. Probably
Yes,
people can also directly contact you on Discord. If not, you
that
can
we
use our Discord for that. We can make like an Ellie and Ellie section there.
mhm. Yeah, I'll try
Definitely.
to answer most questions.
Yeah, he's currently very busy with answering questions on the French server already, as I see. So don't don't expect him to answer immediately. Quite busy. But yeah, this deck is very deep. You can play lots of cards. It's interesting to talk about it. I think the pool, like the overall pool you could include is very huge, and there's lots of room or potential to debate about whatsoever, right? As you said earlier,
Yes.
you could talk about this deck the entire day.
Yeah, for 4 hours.
Yeah,
It's much
rightfully so.
deeper than one might think.
Exactly, exactly. I totally agree with that. Okay, cool. Once again, thanks for being here. And to our viewers, thanks for tuning in. And we will see each other in the next video. Bye bye, guys.
Bye bye.